then is Joe Marconi, also with Elite Worldwide. Um, and so today we wanted to, from a content standpoint, what we're bringing today is we wanted to talk about the bottleneck that we see in most shops and what the biggest bottleneck is in most shops. And, this is a lot of what we talk about in our Eagles course, but, usually the owner is the biggest bottleneck in every shop that we see. So when we bring on
Absolutely.
new clients, this is something that we try to spend a lot of time talking to them about on the one-on-one side when we're coaching, which is, from a personal development standpoint, you typically wind up being the biggest bottleneck in the shop.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most of you in some way, shape, or form are, either trying to grow, hoping to grow. At least I hope all of you guys are. And if you have a growth mindset and you're honest about the growth mindset, you're going to find that, your capacity to grow and your capacity to improve is going to be the biggest bottleneck that you have in the business. And so we believe so strongly that this is such a big topic that this is actually going to be a 4-part series for us. So today is going to be part 1 of this shop owner bottleneck. And today we're going to talk about the realization of what type of bottlenecks, there are in the business, and is specifically related to you as the owner, because there's different owner types, and we typically see different issues in different areas of the business have bottlenecks in it, depending on, depending on which profile you fall under. And then our next series next week we're going to bring to you is going to be the why. So, what happens, why it's important for you to have a mission, vision, and purpose inside of the business. And then part 3 is going to be the self. How do you do the self work to overcome the bottlenecks that you currently have? And then part 4 is going to be how do we build a team to put everything together so we can implement some systems and processes and train the team that it's going to take to remove all the constraints and bottlenecks that we have in the business.
Yeah.
So we hope this little 4-part series gives you guys some clarity on, again, where you fit inside of the business, what restrictions and frictions that you're adding to it, and then gives you a little bit of some concept and strategy of how you can overcome those things. As always, as we're working through this, we're going to try to give you some resources and some homework to do, because we want these conversations to be actionable for you guys. And then if there's anything that you guys need help with afterwards, if you're listening to this and you get the homework and you're trying to work through it, and you need a little bit of assistance with it, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Joe. Come to our Facebook page, ask a question if you need to, use our email address. We'd be happy to help you any which way we can.
Yeah.
But Joe, I know you have a lot
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
thoughts on the,
Yeah. I
owners
want to
being the
just,
bottleneck. We were talking
I
about it
know,
before we went
I
live
know.
here.
I want to, I want to add something to what you're saying here because, and I want to ask all the shop owners in this virtual room to have an open mind, really open mind, because what holds you back, and we're going to talk about this in just a little bit, is the way you perceive your business, your mindset. And I want you to just expand your mind a little bit and put away the ego just a little bit and try to look into yourself and see what's going on, how you're holding yourself back. When we do Fly with the Eagles course, we open up with this. I don't want to give away too much about Flying with the Eagles, but we open up with this concept of looking into the mirror. If you're not happy with your life, you got to look inside the mirror because the person staring back at you is the only one that can make the biggest difference in your life and your future. So when you go through this, when we go through this material, this content today, I want you just to really pay attention because the your barrier, your bottleneck to success is so often yourself. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this, Matt, is because I was there. I had a great business. I didn't realize it, didn't pay attention to the numbers, didn't pay attention to what I was doing. And then consequently, I was exhausted, burned out after 10 years in business. And I didn't know what I had, didn't appreciate what I had. And be honest with you, because of the frustration, because I was the barrier to my success, my real success, the burnout set in, and it was like miserable. I didn't like what I had built, and I hated the industry that I had a lot of love for early on. But once I figured it out, the next 30 plus years was like was unbelievable. So Oh, please pay attention to what we're about to tell you. This is a topic that really, as I'm going through it, I'm getting chills already because it's so relatable to most, and not just auto shop owners. I would say every business owner that goes into business with that passion, with that commitment, and then they lose their way because the business is relying on themselves. So please, just open mindset, no egos. Allow yourself just to say yes, yes, and then when you see yourself when we talk and when we show you things, you may see yourself, just accept it, and then because we're going to give you ways to identify it and then move forward, and then we're going to help you. We're going to help you through this.
Yep,
Okay,
absolutely. So
I could talk all
yeah,
day on this.
yeah. I mean, the concept of our conversation today kind of started with John Maxwell, the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, right? And so, what John Maxwell says is that every leader has a lid, right? And that lid, the business cannot grow or the team can only be successful to the point of the lid of the leader, right? So wherever your leadership lid is, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're a 4, the business will never grow past a 3, right? It's just not possible for the business to outgrow your capacity to lead. And so I was thinking about that, and uh, Joe mentioned a story from Zig Ziglar, and it's a great analogy for this. It takes the lid analogy a little bit further, and it's the story of the flea in the jar. So a flea has the largest natural jump uh, of any animal in the animal kingdom. It can jump higher by its body size and weight than any other organism on Earth. So it can jump around 3 feet. That's roughly 150 to 200 times its own body length. So from a human standpoint, if we think about the average human being 6 foot tall, that would be a 6 foot human jumping over, clearing buildings, right? We'd be able to jump over houses and skyscrapers and all those things. So if we think about this flea, every single flea is born with this natural ability to jump 3 feet. But if we took a flea and we put it in a glass jar and we screwed the lid on top of the glass jar, when the flea starts to jump, it's going to jump. And what does it hit, Joe?
It's it.
Yeah, it hits
On
its
the
head
lid,
on the
on
top
the
of the
lid.
lid, right?
Yeah.
And so eventually it gets tired of hitting its head on the lid
Yep.
and it learns to jump just below the lid so it doesn't hit its head. And so if you leave that flea in the jar over an extended period of time, you're going to see that it's going to stay there. And this is an analogy. This is not a scientific study. So,
We don't know if it's
um,
scientific.
yeah, just I don't know whether this actually happens in real life if you do this, but the analogy is we put the flea in the jar, it jumps and it jumps and it learns to jump just underneath of the lid so it doesn't keep hitting itself. Then if you open the jar, if you leave it in there long enough and it gets conditioned to that jumping height, now you take that same flea that used to be able to jump 3 feet and we take it out of the jar.
Yeah.
When it jumps even out of the jar, when we remove the lid, it stays jumping that same 3 to 4 inches because now it's conditioned to think that it can only jump that high without hurting itself. And he continues the story by saying that if you left that flea alone and you introduced other fleas into the jar, now all of a sudden you have a group of fleas that have the same problem, and if they continued on, it would pass down that trait to the next generation of fleas that they would only be able to jump that 3 or 4 inches. So again, whether this is biologically true or not, scientifically true, I don't know, but it is a great analogy for
Yeah.
your ability as a leader and what happens to the team around you, right? So as a leader, you're the lid, right? You are the flea. Every owner watches this, every owner has a lid and every owner hits that lid in some way, shape, or form. And we wind up passing this DNA down to the team. So as a leader, if we're unable to jump higher than that 3 to 4 inches, because that's where our lid is, then when we pass that DNA along to the team is only going to be able to jump 3 to 4 inches too, even if they have the same capacity as every other biological flea out there that can jump that 3 feet. Our DNA is being passed down to them as a leader, and we now become the glass jar and the lid for them, and they learn to jump as high as we can jump, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's important, it's important to make sure that we identify that we are the capacity lid of the business, and then understanding. So what does that lid sound like, right? So what lids do most of us hit? We hear it all the time. It's the excuses that we build in for ourselves, right? We can't find any good techs in my market. You just don't understand my customers. Customers around here, they just won't pay that. We can't charge X amount of dollars like they can in other areas. Um, I know we need better management, but I just can't afford a manager, and I'm not a good manager, right? My team won't follow if I'm not in the building. They won't do anything unless I'm there. You know, I've always done it this way, and it's worked so far, right? This is the way we've always done it, and so far it's worked. These are all different versions. These are all different lids and capacity limits that we put on ourselves as leaders of the business, and they all have different impacts, right? But in some way, shape, or form, each one of those lids is hindering the capacity of where the business and where you could go and where your team can go, right? So these are all things that are holding us back, limiting mindsets that's holding us back to reaching our full potential.
I just add something at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is a very powerful point right here. There's one word I want you to, everyone here, remove from your vocabulary. That's the word can't. Once you say can't, cannot, you won't. And that's a fact. If you tell yourself, whatever I do, I cannot get my employees to do what I ask them to do. Whatever I do, I cannot move my business forward. Whatever I do, I can't find good people. I can't find good customers. I can't find the right market. Immediately, when you say that, there's a switch inside your brain that flips off. All right. It just literally, it goes off and that's it. You won't do it. One of the reasons why you put that lid on yourself is because you're mentally telling yourself you cannot do it. And once you say can't, you won't. So please, again, we're going to open your mind a little bit, accept what you're saying, and ask yourself right now, while you're listening to us speak, are you telling yourself too often the word can't, cannot? So please, please, please have an open mind and change your thinking and your vocabulary. I can do this. I will aspire. This can happen. It doesn't have to be like this. So just change it around a little bit.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, Joe. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
You're right. Yep.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
And so, and Joe's 100% right. So, I mean, before we go any further, a lot of you guys out there might, when we have this conversation one-on-one with clients, and I know that I fit this description of what we're talking about today. Before we got started, me and Joe were talking offline, and Joe asked me, he said, Matt, he said, did you go back to the first 10 years of my business, being in business and make this for me? And I went back to the first few years of me being in business and made it for me. It's kind of, so everybody has these same issues. I know for me, when it was exposed to me, you get defensive, right? Joe, the first time somebody tells you that you're the problem inside your business,
very defensive. Yeah.
It's difficult to hear that, and it's difficult to believe that, because in a lot of ways we're the star player in the business. So how can I be the star player and the problem at the same time, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But what we're going to ask of you guys today is, number one, you have two different options, right? You can get defensive, you can shut down, or you can pay attention and make a difference, right? You can grow and be past it. So things, try not to think about that we just don't know your shop. We don't know your market. We don't know your team. You're doing the best you can. We know you're doing the best you can, right? We understand that. We know that you've probably heard all this before, because what we're going to talk about today is not earth-shatteringly new. It's based off of things we've referenced Zig Ziglar, we've referenced John Maxwell. There's plenty of this stuff that's out there. You might think it doesn't apply to you. What I can tell you is, in some way, shape, or form, it applies to everybody that's listening, myself and Joe included, to this day. And then you might think to yourself, well, my business is too new. Maybe this is something I need to worry about later. You need to worry about this. This is applicable not just in your business, but it's applicable in life at every single stage of the business and every single stage of life. And then, you might think to yourself that nothing is ever going to change, right? But if nothing changes, then nothing will change. So again, we want to empower you to be the first change in the business, to be able to take the right steps forward. So, and understand that responsibility is not blame, right? When we talk about these things being your responsibility, and it's your responsibility to, to raise the lid inside of the business and to try to take some of the principles that we're going to talk about over the next 4 weeks. We're going to hold a mirror up, and you might see some things inside of yourself and inside of the business that you don't like, right? We want you to take responsibility and fix those things and grow, but we also want to make sure that it's not, we're not blaming you as the business owner for all the problems. We're saying you're responsible for making the change that it's going to take to have the business of your dream, have the team of your dreams. So it's not a blame situation. It's just making sure that we're focusing on the right things and that we're being honest with ourselves. So the real question is,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one thing because when you talk about blame, and Matt's 100% correct. Please don't, we're not pointing blame to anybody. Don't point blame to yourself. That's not the point here. It's very natural for humans to feel this negativity because we go back in time to our ancestors. It was helpful for the early species of humans to recognize threats, the negative things around them. That was natural for us. The people who did that back then, they're the ones that survived. So when they said to themselves early in the morning, well, there could be threats out there. This may not be a good day. The weather may affect it. There may be animals, there may be different people, different tribes that may want to hurt us and our network of people. So that's very, very natural. But when you fast forward to modern times, we've got to kind of control or change that mindset a little bit. We're not saying ignore all the negative things around you that could happen, but you have to put a spin on it that you can aspire and you can change it. If you become too fixed in the way you're doing things, and like Matt said, it doesn't change. Well, we all know what that is. It's a definition of insanity by trying to do the same things over and over again and expecting a change. So blame has no place here in terms of finding solutions to what we're trying to aspire to. It's about recognizing, moving forward, and then having that open mindset to move forward in a positive direction.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, Joe. And so, I mean, the question that we want to ask, really before we get started and the rest of it is, so how do we have an idea about where the lid is, right? So if you disappeared from your shop for the next 30 days, what would break first, right? So what would happen? Would we lose productivity in the back? Would we be unable to sell? Would the customer experience fall apart? Would all of the day-to-day operations things of, filing vendor paperwork, we're, just the little steps that it takes to close out a day, what would actually break without you there? All right. And that's going to give you a pretty decent idea for where the lid is right now. Right. And everybody's lid's in a different spot. Some people are going to have a lid that's this high. Some people are going to have a lid that's up here, and that's okay. Even those of you that are absentee owners still have a lid on how far the business can go, so it'll still be applicable. But that's just a good little thought process there. Sit down for a second at some point in time today, ask that question, and be honest with yourself on what that is, and that'll help you determine what the size of the bottleneck is. If you're in that group of people, and we've all been there, I think at some point in time, where you're like, Matt, I can't even go eat lunch without something breaking down, right? Like I can't walk through the building without everybody stopping and asking me 15, 20 questions. Then just be honest with yourself and understand that that's where the lid is at right now. Your lid's pretty low, right? The business is still needing you to run most of all of the activities of the business. That's fine. You can get out of it. We're going to teach you how to get out of it. But I want you to start there and just ask that question. And so we've identified, kind of at Elite, me and Joe were talking about this, and it really goes back to, we talk about the time management quadrants inside of Eagles, that the Eisenhower matrix from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and Stephen R. Covey, what he teaches for how to manage your time and get the most out of your day. But there's different leadership types here that kind of fit those four quadrants. So, quadrant one is urgent and important. Quadrant two is urgent, is important, but not urgent. And quadrant three is, not important, but urgent. Then
Yeah.
quadrant four is not important and not urgent, right?
Not urgent. Yep.
And
Yep.
so as leaders throughout the day, the things that fill up our day they all basically boil down into one of those four categories, right? And depending on what your leadership personality is, you're going to fall into one of those more so than the others, right? And so pattern one that we see out there, probably the most in our industry, we call them the firefighter, right? So those individuals, we're gonna go over these each individually, but we see pattern one. We call them the firefighter. They react to whatever's on fire. They're running around, trying to do all the stuff. Then you have the hero. Pattern two, is the hero. They're having to save the day on everything, right? They're the star player of every role in the shop, and they're there to save the day. Then there's the hider, right? We have leaders out there that like to just abdicate all of the leadership, responsibilities in the shop, and they don't like conflict. They don't want to have hard conversations. They don't want to make the difficult decisions. They don't want to look in the mirror and hold themselves accountable, and they don't want to hold other people accountable. We see that quite a bit as well. And then the last one is the hobbyist. And the hobbyist is that technician, right? The technician that starts the shop and all he cares about is the car and fixing cars, and never takes the time to develop their skills, their people skills, not just with customers, but also with the internal team, so that they can grow and develop team members around them. Right. So by and large, most of us in some way, shape, or form fall into these patterns, right? And just because you find yourself in these patterns doesn't mean that you can't, that's who you are as a person. That's who you are. That's what your leadership style is. But that doesn't mean that you can't raise the lid on, on these things and still grow and improve. So we're going to go through these individually here for the next little bit. What I think you're going to find is you're going to find yourself in one of these predominantly, and you're going to be
Maybe a
like,
few
yeah,
of them.
that sounds, more than me. Likely, you're going to find that you're a combination of two of them,
Yeah,
right?
probably. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, and again, I fall into a category of two of these. I know Joe, like I said, we were talking beforehand.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh
just,
yeah.
it just is what it is. So,
And, and, and,
um,
and as and Matt, I want to point one thing out. As Matt goes through these, and I'm going to add my little content also, just reflect on it, on how sometimes you may be making excuses. Like I heard the term 100 times. I'd rather be in the shop. It's where I feel most comfortable. I'd rather work on cars. I understand it. I understand all that. And we're not saying that you don't have to spend time in the shop under the hood of a car. But as we're going to reveal to you, if you're not paying attention to the business, because you went into business for a purpose, and like I always tell everybody, you signed a dotted line. You took your pen out and signed the dotted line. I wanted to be a shop owner, a business owner. That's a tremendous responsibility. And the first responsibility is to yourself and your family. And that's why we're here. Right. So please, as we go through this, identify with yourself some of these patterns that we're going to reveal to you, and do you fit into these what in my estimation are sometimes just excuses.
yeah, 100%. And again, just for everybody that's listening, if you whether you listen to this live or listen to the playback, if you'd like the resources and the homework that Brenda sent, please put your email in the chat. We'll make sure to get those resources sent out to you guys, so you can be doing the homework in between the weeks here in our 4-part series. So for pattern number one, we're going to talk about the firefighter a little bit. And Joe, I know me and you kind of we identified with this one pretty
Oh
heavily.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of emotion attached to this when you look back at it too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So the firefighter, what does that look like? Every decision in the shop's flowing through you, right? Your team waits for instructions instead of acting. Your phone never stops ringing. Even on your day off, you're on vacation. If you find yourself on vacation or a Saturday or Sunday and you have people reaching out to you, it's 7 o'clock at night and you got customers calling you. You can't remember the last time you finished a list of anything, right? Like you sit down, you try to sit down maybe on a Saturday or Sunday or after hours, and write out this to-do list. You go to a training event and you take a class and are like, man, I need to do all this stuff. And then you
Yep.
look back a year later and you're still sitting with the same list that's never moved any further, right? Um, and what that is we're reactionary, right? We're living in a reactionary world, and we're just, we're staying 2 inches in front of our face, and we're just tackling whatever pops up. So you train that if you find yourself in that scenario, remember you're the jar and you're the lid. The other fleas that join join your jar, they're jumping as high as you can jump. And what's happened is we've trained them that nothing gets decided without you. So now nothing does.
Yep.
Right? The teams, they're not lazy, they're not incompetent. They've just learned that you're the best decision maker in the shop because you've trained them that you're the best decision maker in the shop, right? And
You
everything that
cripple.
happens now requires you to
Yeah.
make those decisions, right?
You actually cripple your people. You cripple their decision-making process and that they want to be involved. And by the way, for shop owners, if you're in this mode, you're going to realize you're in this mode. And I will tell you one thing. You're driving home at night in your truck and you're exhausted. You're really, your point of exhaustion is, and you're shaking your head saying, I know I was busy today. I just don't know if I accomplished anything. If you tell yourself that as you're driving home, you're in this mode. You're a firefighter. You're putting out fires all day long. This is called crisis mode. Crisis mode. So,
Yep.
not a good place to be. You will lead to eventual exhaustion, eventual burnout.
Yeah. And so, I mean, every fire that you put out on a day-to-day basis is a fire that you taught the team, you know, to
Me.
let you handle,
Yep.
right? If you taught the team that they could handle that and how to handle it, then we would eventually have less fires. So what is the cost of being the firefighter, right? So the cost is, there's a financial cost to it. Your time is really the most expensive labor in the entire shop, right? And it should be like if you really are the star player, then you should consider your time investment of everything that you do to be the most expensive employee in the entire shop, right? We're not talking about what you actually pay yourself. We're saying from a skill set standpoint, you should be the most valuable skilled asset in the shop. And if we looked at that, every hour you spend putting out all these little small fires is an hour not spent on growth. It's an hour not spent on training. It's an hour not spent on strategy. It's an hour keeping that lid exactly as tight as it was the day before, right? That's all we're doing is just making sure that lid is tight and that we keep it low, and we keep the constriction in the business. The cost of the team, your team is never going to develop, right? They can't learn without making mistakes and without making decisions and without you having, the focus on what your job really should be, which is leadership and development, helping them through that. And your good ones are going to leave because of that, because they're going to see you as somebody that's a barrier to their personal growth and their professional development. And they're going to leave and seek opportunities elsewhere. And then there's a personal cost, right? If you're in firefighter mode, like Joe said, you're on the way home every single day and you're trying to figure out what you did today and you have all that stress and all that weight. We hear it a lot, Joe. Everybody says, I don't take it home with me, right?
I
That's
know.
bullcrap.
It is.
I
It
don't know
is.
anybody that can't take it home with them,
No,
right? If you
no.
have a bad day at work or you have a bad day at home, it
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 goes both
transitions over.
ways. This goes
It's just
both
no way
ways.
possible,
Yes, there's
right?
no way.
We're
You
all
can't shut it
human,
off. You wouldn't be
you
human if you
know.
didn't shut it off. You know.
Yeah, all of us are human. We're all emotional beings, and at some point in time, that emotion starts to overwhelm. So it's going to impact the relationship that you have with your wife. It's going to impact the relationship that you have with your kids. It's going to impact the relationship that you have with your friends and the rest of your family. It's going to impact your health, right? I mean, all of
Yeah.
these things it's going to start creeping in because from a capacity standpoint, you can just only do so much, right? You can only do so much.
Yeah. Well, what happens, Matt, you think you can block it out. You think you can just put it on the shelf. What happens is it builds and it builds and it builds to a point where it just erupts. And that's even worse sometimes.
Yep.
So be very, very careful in this mode.
And we're not telling you as we go through this that you'll never be a firefighter,
No.
right? Are there going to be times throughout a day that
Fuck
that you're
back
going to have
in.
to,
Yeah,
yeah, that you're going to have
yeah.
to put out a
It's gonna
fire? Look,
happen.
we did it. All right. Joe and myself, we're business owners. We've been there. You're going to have to go put out a fire from time to time. You're going to have a team. You're going to have
Yeah,
team members that get sick, and you're going to have to go and dust off the toolbox and get back in the bay.
yeah,
You're going to have things that happen that are going to kind of bring you back into the moment that you have to deal with. So nobody's telling you that you can't deal with those things in the moment. But if this is where you're living, if these things that we just talked about today, if that sounds like,
yeah.
man, this is what I do all
I
day,
agree.
every day, that's a problem. And it shouldn't
Yeah.
be that way. And it doesn't have to be that way. Right. There is a better way to do it.
And then one more thing to add to this is that the reason why it's so difficult to get out of this firefighter mode, this crisis mode, is because you become so used to putting out these fires that it actually gives you an emotional high. It gives you that hit of dopamine that you get that sense of satisfaction and you keep on doing it. Even though it exhausts you, it frustrates you, you go home miserable sometimes, but believe it or not, it's giving you some sort of satisfaction. You feel this is your place.
Yep.
You actually make a determination in your brain that this is what you need to be doing. I need to fix these problems. It becomes part of who you are. It's much, much more difficult, as we're going to tell you later on, to sit down and build out a plan that doesn't have any immediate results. The results take place down the road. And that's where the problem is. That's difficult. That takes more discipline. And we're going to tell you a little bit more of that in just a bit.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the next pattern that we see a lot here, Joe, is the hero, right?
Hero.
Has to be
Yep,
the
the
one who
hero.
saves the day. They take
Yep.
pride in being indispensable. Um, you're the best diag guy in the shop. You're the only one that can sell, these types of services to the customers. You have to finish other people's work, after hours. If I don't do it, it just won't get done right.
Get done. Yeah.
Right? It just won't get done. You know, you take, if you want to do something, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. If you find yourself in that thought process and in these thinkings, you're probably the hero. So what happens there is, being needed feels good. Being indispensable feels even better. Joe just talked about that dopamine hit that you get. And I mean, this is psychologically true. It feels good to be the hero in
Real.
those moments, to go
It's
in
real.
and,
Yeah.
Joe, you tell a story at Eagles about, selling a timing belt job, to a customer when you overheard the service advisor failing to sell that timing belt job, right? You swoop in like the hero, you sell that timing belt job,
I feel good.
feels good, right? It
Yeah.
feels really good. You have a technician that comes to you if you're more the tech minded guy and they're struggling on a car and you say get out of the way, here's another job, you go do it, let me have that one, and you come in and you diagnose that car in 20 minutes. It feels good, right? You get a lot of sense of pride and satisfaction out of that. The issue is though is that many owners built their identity around being the one who can do all these things, and letting go of that is a loss of identity, right?
Yeah.
If I'm
Yeah.
not the best technician in the shop, if I'm not the best service advisor, if I'm not the one that can save the day, then they lose their identity in the shop. They don't know where they fit, right?
Yeah.
And
You
so,
see, can I just play the little psychological point the game there a little bit?
yeah,
If you're a great technician, all right, like I was a good tech, I started as an automotive mechanic in the 70s. I became very, very good at what I did. I spent the first 10 years of my business career learning how to be a better mechanic. So when I first started to realize this wasn't my place, I was still the hero. And I'm going to give you a real quick example. So a technician comes over to you and they're working on a problem. He says, "Hey boss, I'm stuck here." And you give him the answer, and it's the right answer. And he said, "Whenever you have a problem, you just come to me, I'll help you out." And just keep giving the right answer. In time, he's not going to be able to think on his own. Here's what happens. He's going to come to you, "Hey boss, I'm stuck here." You say, "Here's the right answer." But what if you give him now, Matt, what if you give him a solution to a problem and it doesn't fix the problem? What happens? He comes back to you and says, "Hey boss, that didn't work. What do you got next?" What you've done there is trained that technician not to think on his own or her own.
that's
And
right.
that's the problem. That's the problem. You want to have them look, it's the old saying, if I give you a fish, you eat for a day. If I teach you how to fish, you eat for a lifetime, right? That's the old expression. You heard it 100 times. So you have to resist. But for the technician heroes in this virtual room, be very, very careful of how you give. It's okay to teach, it's okay to mentor and coach, But please, they have to learn how to play the game. They learn how to play the game. So they have to learn how. What I mean by that is you can't run for them, you can't catch the ball for them, you can't hit the ball for them. They have to learn all the skills have to be taught. The more you can say, the more you can be reserved and let them think on their own, they're going to start learning how that process happens inside their own brain, and they will become their own heroes. And that's what you want.
100%. And so, what are the financial impacts of being the hero? So the business cannot scale beyond your capacity, right? If you're the hero, if you're the star player, if you're the one that's doing all the production and making everything happen, it can't scale past you, right? You become the cap on revenue, the cap on margin, you become the cap on everything. Your A players will leave, right? Because nobody wants to be Robin to somebody else's Batman, right? And so, I mean,
No,
if you do hire a team player, I mean, if you do hire an A-level player and you're the one running around making yourself the hero on everything, then you're probably not going to hold on to that team member very long. The other thing is your business at that point in time becomes worthless to other people, meaning that when it is your time to hang it up, if you're the hero and you're the one that makes everything go inside of the business, your business is unsellable. All you have is a bunch of assets, because as soon as we take you out of the business, there is no business anymore. What do we have, right?
If you're the
So,
main asset, you don't have a business. If you're the main asset, you do not have a business.
yep.
Yes.
And so that's very bad. I mean, how many times we talk to people, Joe, that they've worked 30 years of their life, right? And it's
Sad. Yeah.
time for them to retire and step away. And instead of building an asset the entire 30 years, they've come in and they've made themselves the hero, and they've built something. And unfortunately, when it's time for them to retire, they have to just lock the door,
They
sell the
clean the
asset,
door. I know.
and that's all they have, right?
It's sad.
So,
It's sad.
we don't want to see that for anybody. This industry it's a great industry, and it can be great for you and your family, and you can make a great living off of it. But it's too difficult to work for 30 years and have nothing to show for it at the end of it, right? It's too difficult.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself as the hero, we're going to spend some time talking about how you can break that. The next one is the hider. And I'm going to be honest with you, this one feels like it has the least amount of impact, but it probably creates the lowest lid in the entire business,
Yeah.
right? And so the hider avoids all of the hard conversations. They disappear whenever leadership is needed, right? So Joey's my technician. He's my lead tech. Joey's just, he's not showing up on time. He's not following procedures. He's not doing, he's not doing good multi-point inspections. He's not verifying his repairs afterwards. What does the hider do, Joe? Oh, Joe's just
He avoids
just having a bad
confrontation.
day.
It's called conflict avoidance. You just emotionally, you just cannot, because it's too difficult at that point. Because honestly, you've never learned how to deal with that, because inside yourself, you haven't gained that confidence. Because you don't view yourself as the actual leader of the company. It is the most damaging, Matt. It really is.
Yep. So you stay tucked in the office, or you stay tucked under the hood, wherever you're comfortable. You're going to stay focused in that one area, and then you're just going to avoid everything else, right? You're avoiding looking at the financials. You do everything that you can do not to look at the bank account, not to look at your credit card statements, not to review a P&L. There's problems in the business, but instead of trying to jump in there and fix them, you just avoid them and hope that they go away. Or maybe you start hiring staff, hoping that the staff will fix these problems, right? Like, we have a leadership problem in the shop. I'll hire a manager and I'll let that manager deal with it, right? It'll be their job. They're the manager. It should be their job to fix it, right? We don't have these tough conversations. We don't hold people accountable, and the team grows in whatever direction that it wants to grow, right? The tail begins to wag the dog, and the team really kind of becomes the life of the business instead of you being the direction and the life of the business. And so, like Joe said, you do this stuff because you're trying to avoid the conflict. The numbers scare you, and the numbers feel bad. You're letting people. You don't want to let people down. So you don't like having those negative conversations. So we just avoid everything, right? We hide from it. We just pretend that it doesn't happen, and we just avoid it.
Well, how many of us have gotten to our trucks or cars on a tough situation occurs or a tough day and just says, I'm getting out of here for a while and just went down the road just to get that mental break. Sometimes it's needed, don't get me wrong. Sometimes that mental break does help you, but that's being the hider. That's avoiding the situation. Conflict avoidance. It's a term in psychology that really it's because there's so much that's the point of time where it's erupting because you just you haven't set enough of the right things in place to allow the process to take care of it to take care of itself. You've been the fireman so long, so you need a this is the point in time where you need that mental break. You can't do it at this point. So all these have steps that we have to identify first and then find solutions to it. We're gonna
Yep.
identify first the issues and then we're going to give you the solutions for it over the
Yep.
next couple of weeks.
So what are the financial costs of being the hider? You know, the problems left alone, they compound, right? You can't hide from your problems. We know that, but for whatever reason, we still try to do it. The underperforming employee continues to become a culture problem. The wrong pricing continues to build up and cause issues on the financial side and the P&L. The financial reviews that we skip, we continue to not have leadership and development. As far as a vision goes inside of the business, and all of those things wind up, can wind up having a big impact on cash flow and the financial performance of the business. A players are not sticking around for this at all.
Yeah.
I can promise you. Like they'll
Yeah.
smell this from a mile away, and as soon as they
Yep.
identify it, they are gone.
Yep.
So you will have a lot of turnover, and if you find yourself in this, and if you find yourself with a lot of turnover, you need to really identify where you're at here. Um, the avoidance does not make the feelings, the bad feelings go away. I mean, the personal cost is you can avoid it, but you can only avoid it for so long. They're still there. And you know that they're still there because we're intelligent enough to know that we didn't fix anything. And so every single day there's a little bit of, there's another grain of salt that's added to the mountain of stress that we have, right? We just added one more little bit because we know that it just continues to build up. Um, and so again, this is the one that has the lowest lid. If you find yourself in this, you need to be really committed to trying to working through this one.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
the last
I
one
agree.
is the hobbyist, and probably we see this a lot. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's
Um,
not. If done properly, you can still enjoy. I want you to enjoy what you do, especially
yeah,
if you came from the technician's world and the mechanical world. I want you to enjoy what you do. I really do.
but we see this a lot, and the E Myth talks about this. They call it the technician problem.
The initial
The
mindset. Yep. Yep.
entrepreneurial seizure,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
I'm a great technician. I'm tired of working for somebody else. I'm going to go start my own shop, right? So this would be the hobbyist. You opened a shop because you loved working on cars, right? And but not because you were passionate about running a business or had experience or had committed yourself to developing yourself as a business owner or even ready to run a business. You still treat the financials as a someone else's job. Like you
Yeah.
start the business and you're like, yeah, that's my CPA's job. I don't really do anything with that. Um, you don't really set goals. You don't have visions. You don't have anything else. You'll take some draws when there's cash there, but you skip it when there's not. You're just paying yourself as you can, kind of going along.
Yeah.
The shop has been the same size for, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 20, 30 years, right? You and one other person.
Yeah.
You feel guilty when business decisions feel like business decisions, right? You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we hear that so much. We see it a lot. There's a lot of shop owners that start off as technicians and for whatever reason, they despise the business world,
I
right?
know.
They got jaded from having bad management and bad leaders in their past. And in their mind, they wanted to start something that was pure and that was all about doing the right thing for the car, right?
Yeah.
And that showcased the technician talent and the technician skill set. And there's nothing wrong with any of that other than the fact that when you open a business, you signed on the dotted line that you own a business.
That's right.
And the business itself has very little to do with what we do for the business. And what I mean by for the business is it has very little to do with the actual product itself. It has way more to do with the systems, the processes, the procedures, the team, and then what the leadership is doing to support the mission, support the vision, and support the team. Right?
Yeah.
What we do is a byproduct of all of those things.
Yeah.
And so the hobbyist is focusing on the product as the lead thing in the business, and a business owner focuses on the product as a byproduct of the business doing all of the right things that create a good product, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so why it happens, becoming an owner, the mentality is different from being from legally being an owner to really being an owner, right?
Yeah.
And then, many, for whatever reason, they just made the mental move. The shop is still a hobby. They get paid for it. But for whatever reason, they never develop skill sets to be a good business owner.
Yeah.
So what are the implications and costs of that? You're going to have a real hard time making a profit doing it this way. If there's no profit goal, if we don't have an idea of how to make money or how much we're supposed to be able to make here. And a lot of times the hobbyist has they have guilt, right? They have guilt built into the numbers. Like they purposely limit themselves because they don't think that a repair shop should make more than this amount of money. And that if they make any more than that, they're being greedy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We see that a lot with people. We don't have a retirement fund. We don't have an exit strategy or an exit value. There's no cushion there if there's a bad week or a bad month, right? Those are the guys that we see living week to week, paycheck to paycheck, really struggling to, pay their vendor payables and make sure all the bills are paid. The team can feel it, right? If you're a hobbyist, at that point in time, a more direct word for a hobbyist is an amateur, right?
Yeah.
And if you're an amateur business owner, and not a professional business owner, then your team can pick up on that, right? And again, they're going to be able to see that, and they want to go find somebody that's a real leader, has a real business, and that looks like they're going to be successful. Nobody wants to follow somebody that doesn't look like they're ahead of where they are, right?
Yeah.
And if your financial cap doesn't look like it's putting them ahead of where they want to be, why would you ever want to follow that? Why would you ever want to work for that person, right? So the personal cost of it, the family pays first, right? When you sign on that dotted line, unfortunately, you drug your family as equity, right? You drug them right along with you, and you put them up as collateral. And if you're not making any money and the business is a hobby, how does the mortgage get paid? How does the food get put on the table? How do we keep our own, personal assets together and make sure that our vehicles are safe and reliable? And that we have the things that we need to have a happy, healthy family.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to go on vacation? How do we set forth that college fund for the team? So usually the hobbyist is the one that's leaving the most money on the table because they've all they're focused on is the work and getting
There's
cars.
a vehicle in front of that. Yeah. Matt, this is, when you train to be a technician, you see the problem in front of you, you want to fix it. The vehicle becomes your main focal point. Nothing, like you said, nothing wrong with that. But once you trans over to that being a business owner, you take on new responsibilities. And it's more than just you at that point. It's more than just satisfying your need to fix this vehicle. You have an obligation to everyone around you, including the customer. And you're not doing the right thing for anyone by being stuck in this hobbyist mode. The truth is that many hobbyists were none of them were ever taught how to be a business owner. And that's where the problem is. When I went to business, I was a technician on a Friday and a business owner on a Monday. Like I tell people, I had no business being in business. I had to learn the hard way to stop being a hobbyist, stop being a hirer, stop being a fireman, start being a business owner. And once you do that, it does take a mind shift. You see yourself advancing in a different direction. And like, look, if your love for cars is the reason why you went into business, don't lose that passion. Don't lose that commitment I still, at my age, I still love being around cars. If I can get on the hood of a car, even at this age, I love it. I love the smell. I love getting my hands dirty. I love the whole idea of being an automotive mechanic. That's how I started. But you like you keep on saying, probably for the fifth or sixth time now, you signed a dotted line. You said I wanted to be a shop owner. Okay. And that means that you have to be able to shift a little bit and spend time working on the business. We've heard this. Instead of being in the business all the time in the trenches, working on the business. That means you have an obligation to the people around you. You need to build them up. You need to teach them, mentor them, coach them. You need to build an infrastructure that supports everything instead of you being the sun and everything revolves around you. So extremely, extremely important things we're talking about today.
Yeah. And so, to kind of wrap up our conversation a little bit here, what we really want you guys to think about right now is what happens, what is the math of you not identifying this and not changing it and living another year in firefighter mode, living another year as the hobbyist, living another year as the hider, living another year as the hero. What happens? Is it another year of working 60 hours and feeling stuck? Is it another year of your team, waiting for you to decide and, waiting for you to grow and potentially losing some of the key team members, that you have working for you now? Another year of the same revenue with the same problems. If your revenue is staying the same, we all know inflation is growing. Your take home, even if you're making a net profit, right? If you made $100,000 in net profit this year, fantastic. Maybe you even made more. But if you make the same next year, you actually lost money, right? Because all of your living expenses went up, right? So if you're not growing, you're slowly slipping by. So even if you have a good business, you as the lid has a cost. So really sit down and think about what the cost of you being the lid is. The big thing that we want you guys to do is understand that every single shop owner out there, all of us, regardless of how big or small your business is, you are the biggest constraint and the biggest lid of the business. All right. 100%, all of us. And it will never grow past the capacity that you have as a leader. It cannot. It is impossible for the business to grow past your capacity as a leader. Right. So what do we have to do there? I want you to stop blaming the team, right? Because there's a pattern that keeps us in that same, it keeps us in the lid, keeps us in the jar, right? And so what we want you to do there is we want you to stop with the excuses, number one. So stop blaming the team. It's not their fault that they come ask you. It's not their fault that you can't find good technicians. It's not their fault that you have to go finish all the work. It's not their fault that you have to diagnose their car, right? So again, we said we were going to push some buttons, and some of you guys may get defensive about this. We don't want you to get defensive. We just want to be honest with you and let you know that, unfortunately, it is, if you find yourself in that, it is your lid. We want you to stop blaming the market, right? If your business is declining a little bit, we're hearing a lot of shops out there, they're struggling with the current economic and geopolitical climate that's happening right now. Gas prices are going up. The American public's tightening up a little bit. It's going to get harder, and it's harder for everybody. All right. Stop blaming that. Right. You can't do anything about that. Stop letting that be a lid for you. My customers won't pay. Nobody around here spends money. You just don't understand my customer base. If you find yourself in these, saying these kind of things to yourself or other people, we've coached thousands of shops over the last 37 years. Right. And whether it's a $200,000 a year shop or a $5 million a year shop, it's not market dependent, right? It's not market dependent. So stop blaming the market. Just understand that you could be in, and we've coached shops that were in big metro areas that had really limited businesses. And then we've coached shops that are in the middle of nowhere, Canada, that are netting $1 million a year. Right. And so we've seen it all over the place. So market, don't let that be the barrier to you. Understand that it's probably you that is still the barrier. Don't blame timing. If you're finding yourself, well, it's just not the right time. It's just not this. It's just not that. You're probably hiding from solving these problems. right? Don't blame the outside influencers. Remember the flea, remember the flea story. You're the one in the jar. Try to take that lid. Your goal as the leader is not just to raise everybody else's lid around you, because you can't raise their lid until you raise your own. You're the first flea in the jar, right? And you're adding all the other, your team members, you're adding those team members to your jar. So try to raise the lid for yourself, and let's try to jump as high as we possibly can as an individual. Um, and then, so what we want you to do today is we want you to make a commitment. We want you to make a commitment to say it out loud and understand that you are the bottleneck. Because again, until you identify the problem, until you look in the mirror and you say that I am the issue, you can't fix the problem. So you got to identify yourself as the problem first. And then you need to also identify that you are the solution to the problem, right? Which, how empowering is that, Joe, to know that I am the problem and I'm also the solution. It can change. This can get better.
It's the first step. It's
I
the
can
first
learn
step.
the skills.
Yeah.
I can learn the things that I need to learn, that I don't have to do this day in and day out, and that it can get better.
Yeah.
And Joe, you tell your milk crate story at Eagles, and most people tear up, and it always, I've heard it 50 times now, and it still hits me right here, because we all have that same story, right? We all have something that's very similar to us, and where it changes is you realize that it's your fault, and you are the reason, and then you get to start taking advantage of fixing that problem and solving that issue. So next week we're going to get into part 2 of the series. Part 2 of the series, we're going to talk about the why. So most shop owners cannot tell you why their business exists. Their team can't tell you why the business exists. We're going to fix that for you next week. We really want to sit down and talk about that. And each week we're going to give you guys some resources that you can use. This week's resource is going to be a little survey to help you identify which one of these, whether you're the firefighter, the hider, the hobbyist, or the hero. We're going to try to help you do that, and then identify something that can help you get out of that mode, right? So if you are one of those things, what can you do? What action should you be taking to try to get yourself out of that? And then we're also going to give you some resources that you need to be looking into on your own, because there's books. Like I said, none of this information is new. This isn't stuff that Matt and Joe came up with today. These problems have been in existence since business started, thousands of years ago, and people have been trying to come along and solve these problems and help people grow past this. So we're going to give you some books to read so that you can develop these skills that you need to try to grow as a leader and develop the team around you. And then, so your homework this week, we want you to write your pattern on paper. So, primary pattern, backup pattern. So by pattern, we mean, which one are you? Are you the hobbyist? Are you the hider? And then again, like I said, most of us wind up being some sort of a combination of the two. The hero and the firefighter kind of go hand in hand with each other, right? And the hobbyist and the hider a lot of times go hand in hand with each other. So, which one is your primary? Which one is your backup pattern? Answer the 30-day question honestly. If you left your business, if you disappeared for 30 days, what are the things that would break down, right? What would go wrong inside of your business? What can't your team do without you there? And then tell one person, right? When you go to change a pattern in your life, if you tell somebody else, if you have that accountability partner, if you have a coach, tell your coach. If you don't tell a key team member, tell a spouse, your business partner, whoever it is. Saying it out loud makes it real. When you identify yourself, I am the hobbyist. That's who I am, and I want to change that. I'm going to change what I need to do to not be the hobbyist anymore. I am the hero. I don't want to be that. I want to change that about myself. When you make that commitment out loud, there's a psychological difference that happens, and you start re-identifying yourself. You can change your identity. So it is possible. It's not necessarily possible to change your personality. We are who we are, but you can change your perception of yourself, and you can change your identity of yourself. And that is very possible. And, we see that with people that come into large sums of money, and they start their identity changes, right? Or vice versa, go the other way. So your identity can change, and we want you to create your identity as the perfect you, right? As the perfect business owner. And so if you identify as one of these, that's okay. That's who your personality traits are going to dictate which one of those you probably are, and that's okay. So you can't change that, but you can change the identity. You can change the impact of your personality type, right? So we want you to do that. Again, if you put your information in the chat, we're going to send you some resources that'll help out with this. Put your email in there, and we'll be in touch with you before the end of the day to send you the homework and get you some of this information so we can help you. And then we're going to get into a lot of the how do we change these patterns? How do we move forward? And how do we raise the lid? Right? How do we identify to get out of these issues? Empower the team and improve our personal development as well, so that we can raise the lid so the capacity of the business can grow to the lid.
I'd like to add one last thing, Matt. One last thing. If you find yourself stuck, or hopefully you identify today a lot of what we said, that this is you, I don't want you to think you got to overcome all these things overnight. Take 1 to 2, 3% the difference in every day and try to commit to making an improvement every single day. One thing about, like Matt said, perception is that the person you want to become tomorrow, you have to start being that person today. And it does take a mind shift, a perception. So just start to make improvements. Tell yourself, create a log, write down things that you're doing each and every day. Because to be successful requires understanding what you should be doing, but more importantly, what you should not be doing each and every day. And that's not going to happen overnight. But if it happens just a little bit at a time, tell yourself, I want to make a 1% improvement today, a 2% improvement tomorrow, and let that build upon itself. Well, then after a period of time, when weeks and months, pass by, you're going to make a lot of improvements in your life. But you just can't be stuck. And a lot of us get stuck. We really get stuck, and we really don't know the way out. And today we hope that this is phase one, all right, of a 4-part series. And phase one is identifying. So that's the first step. If you identify some of these things today, then that's who you are. It's going to take time to move out of that, but it has to start somewhere. So if you have this perception of who you want to be in the future, start becoming that person today, and it'll make a world of a difference.
Absolutely. So that's the end of our presentation today. Again, we're going to continue to build on this over the next 3 weeks. We appreciate you guys coming and spending some time with us. We know how busy your days are. We know what you guys are dealing with. And it means a lot to us that you're taking a little bit of your time and investing it, with us in yourself. And we know it's going to pay dividends for you. Again, we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes in this starting next week. We're gonna everybody that's asked for the resources, we'll get those resources sent out to you before the end of the day, so you guys can start working on this stuff. If you're listening to this on the recorded side later live, still feel free to comment in the section. We'll keep up with the comments and make sure that we get you the resources so you guys can follow along and get the most out of this.
Absolutely. Yes.
We wish you guys the best of luck this week in your bays and at your front counter. And as always, if there's anything that we can do at Elite to help you guys out, remember there's no obligation here. We're a people first company. We want to see you guys be successful and have the business of your dreams. Reach out to myself at m.lofton@eliteworldwide.com. Reach out to Joe at j.marconi@eliteworldwide.com, or you can go to our website, eliteworldwide.com, and just go to contacts, and anybody here at Elite can help you out. But if there's something that we can do for you, please feel free to reach out, and we'd be happy to help any way we can.
Yeah. Excellent. See everybody next week. Thank you.
See you guys.
Take care. Bye now.